Apologies, ladies and gentlemen, that we're waiting for the live stream, Rochford District Council's live stream to work, and I understand there's a few, as they say, technical issues with that. So we'll probably be a few minutes late starting. All right. Right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this meeting of the Planning Policy Committee on Monday the 16th of March. Can I draw everyone's attention to page 3 within the agenda, which sets out details regarding fire safety instructions and the webcasting arrangements. In the event of the fire alarm sounding, please leave the building via the nearest exit and make your way to the assembly point located in the Market car park adjacent to the Civic Suite building. Please do not return to the building unless given permission by council staff. For the benefit of those watching from home and those in the public gallery, members of the committee are seated in the front row, and all non-members of the committee in attendance are seated in the rows behind. Apart from actually three members of the public who, due to the overflow tonight, are sitting within the chamber itself, but to my left. Before we get into the agenda, it really is lovely to see so many of you here tonight and take interest. But I do want to draw your attention to the fact that we're talking about planning policy tonight. We will not be talking about any specific sites. We're going to be talking about the local plan, probably the Regulation 18 stage of the local plan, and we will not be talking about any sites. I understand from some of you that leaflets have come through your doors about particular sites. There won't be any discussion about those particular sites. But provided you don't mind listening to a lot of stuff about the Regulation 18 process and how the local plan is developing, then please, you're most welcome. So I thought I'd just make that point at the start, because I don't want there to be disappointment that we haven't been perhaps talking about the very thing that perhaps you came along to listen to. So there we are. Right, apologies for absence. We've had apologies from Councillor Newport, and Councillor Cripps is substituting for Councillor Newport. Welcome, Councillor Cripps. And non-members of the committee visiting tonight, Councillor Angelina Marriott, so welcome to you. I think everyone else is members here, so there we are. Item 2, minutes of the meeting held on the 7th of January 2026. Are the minutes agreed, members? Thank you very much indeed. Item 3, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? Well, I will go on to say, Councillor Steptoe, if you are declaring an interest, please state the interest and the reason why you are declaring that interest. Councillor Steptoe.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. As Essex County Councillor, because in your report you refer to the S106 NHS funding, which as you know, I am still working on at county level, trying to understand where all the money's got hidden.
Thank you, Councillor Steptoe. A good piece of work on your part, because you've been keeping me informed on it, and when you find out, perhaps you'll let us know. Thank you. Right, no other declarations of interest coming forward. So with that, we move on to public questions on notice. We've received 3 questions from members of the public, which have been circulated separately to the main agenda coming out. And I think we go to our first question from Mr. Tim Fry, who is chair of Hambro Hill United Community Group. Mr. Fry, I think you don't have to stand up, but just make sure that you're speaking to the microphone. You might actually do better sitting down.
Oh, right.
Only in the sense you can pull the microphone towards you and...
I was quite looking forward to standing up. Okay.
You do whatever you're most comfortable doing.
Well, now you've pointed it out, I'll talk into the mic. So, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, my question is, Hambro Hill forms a constrained corridor linking Rayleigh and Hockley and Rochford with the B1013 and to Chelmsford via Rawrath Lane. It already experiences congestion and recorded road traffic accidents along its length, including at the B1013 Hockley Road mini roundabout and near the railway bridge. Given that multiple development sites are now proposed along this corridor, can the committee confirm whether the local plan transport assessment has assessed the cumulative traffic and highway safety impacts along the Hambro Hill corridor as a whole, rather than considering each site in isolation?
Thank you, Mr. Fry, for your question. What a great question, and something that we as councillors often talk about in relation to traffic assessments and all sorts of things. But when we assess transport impacts for the local plan, we look at them strategically and cumulatively, meaning that we consider the effect of several developments happening at the same time across the district. This strategic assessment is being undertaken now through the emerging local plan evidence base. However, it is important to explain that individual planning applications cannot legally take into account wider cumulative transport impacts from developments that have not yet been approved or built. They must be assessed on their own merits with the confines of the National Planning Policy Framework, the NPPF. This is one of the reasons the Council has formally raised concerns with the Government about the ambiguity in national policy, particularly how the NPPF requires the severity of residual cumulative transport impacts to be interpreted. I'll just break off at that point from the formal response, but those of you that have been following this committee will know that regularly we are very frustrated at the lack of the definition of severe, and that has gone on for many years, but certainly since the appeal that the council fought unsuccessfully in relation to the Ashington Road site. We set out these concerns in a letter to the ministers on the 26th of February, jointly signed by the leader, the vice chair and myself as chairman of this planning policy committee, and as yet we still await a reply. I think that's correct? Yeah? Okay. As part of our local plan work, we're carrying out a full transport assessment that will consider the combined impacts of proposed growth across the district, including along key corridors such as the Rayleigh-Hockley-Ashington route and the wider highway network. This approach will give a far more realistic and holistic picture of the transport impacts than any individual planning application process could. These studies will also test the potential for improvements or mitigations required to support sustainable growth, including public transport, active travel connections, and local junction upgrades. The findings of this work, alongside the emerging infrastructure delivery plan, will inform decisions on the scale and distribution of developments in the next version of the local plan. So there we have it, Mr. Fry. But it may be that you wish to come back with a supplementary question relating up to my answer.
Yes, please. It's a very specific one. I understand that you're taking a strategic overview and you're looking along the whole corridor, which is very reassuring. Will that include separate studies at, for example, the constrained railway bridge going down Hambro Hill and the B1013 mini roundabout as part of that assessment?
I may bring in one of our officers, but my understanding is that the purpose of the consultation process on Regulation 18, which is underway at the present time, looks at specifics and looks at individual representations that have been made by groups or individuals to specific points around our district. So those points having been made through the consultation process will be taken account of. But I bring in one of the officers if they want to comment further, just to help clarify.
Thank you, Chair. So the transport assessment obviously will need to look at all the whole road network, as the Chair has outlined. In terms of specific junctions, they are listed within that current Regulation 18 transport assessment document. If in your review of that you note that there's junctions you feel should be included that aren't, we're happy to receive those comments as part of the consultation, and they can be considered further in consultation with our consultants as we develop the transport assessment going forwards. There is obviously more work to be done in terms of the next stage of that, leading up to the next stage of consultation.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Quilter. And thank you indeed, Mr. Fry. So thank you for coming to tonight. Now, we've got a second question, and the question was actually submitted by Mr. David Livermore, but I understand that he can't make it tonight. So Mr. Heaton, I believe, has come along to ask the question. But it is practice that whilst under my discretion, certainly very happy for you to ask the question, because the supplementary would have to relate to the answer, and Mr. Livermore isn't here to ask a supplementary. We have to restrict it to just the question, and I'll give you the answer. Mr. Heaton, if you want to go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Robert Heaton. I am Treasurer of the Wheatley Action Group, which is a group that's been in existence for exactly 1 week. Its aim, simply put, is to inform and involve residents within the area in the many issues and statutory processes such as this, which can have a major impact upon their daily lives and the overall community well-being. I'm here, as you've said, on behalf of David Livermore, who unfortunately couldn't attend. The question put is, in 2021, the Council consulted on the Spatial Options document, which explored a range of strategic approaches to meeting housing need across the district. These options included different distributions of growth, such as larger new settlements, more dispersed development across settlements, and urban extensions. However, the current draft local plan appears to concentrate a significant proportion of proposed housing growth around Rayleigh and its surrounding areas, largely through urban extensions. Given the earlier consultation responses, including that of Rayleigh Town Council, raised concerns about urban sprawl, infrastructure capacity, and the cumulative impact of development on Rayleigh, please could the Council confirm what assessments have been undertaken to demonstrate that Rayleigh's transport network, healthcare provision, schools and other infrastructure can accommodate this level of housing growth? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Heaton. The simple factor is we're contesting the growth, the expected growth, which is being set by central government on a considerable number of houses, way beyond what we consider is a realistic target for this authority. So we're grappling with that as we speak, and we're grappling with it in a number of ways, not least a number of letters which have gone to central government, making exactly the point you're making about transport. But I will go to my more formal answer, but it is understandable that residents will naturally focus on the proposals closest to them. One would expect that. However, in preparing the local plan, the council must consider the needs and evidence for the whole district, ensuring a consistent and transparent approach. The council has already raised concerns with government that the 2021 census data does not align with the much higher housing numbers required through the standard method, which does not reflect local population and demographic trends. This point was set out in our letter of the 13th of November 2025, jointly signed by the leader of the council, the vice chairman, Councillor Adrian Eaves, and myself, as on behalf of this Planning Policy Committee. On transport, we have also raised with ministers the absence of a national definition of severe, comes back to my earlier point, severe cumulative transport impacts in the MPPF, which creates uncertainty for residents and local authorities. This was set out in our 26th of February letter, also signed by the same people. It is important to emphasise that this Regulation 18 consultation represents an early draft local plan. No sites have been allocated at this stage, and I'll make that very clear. No sites have been allocated at this stage. The purpose of this consultation is to gather feedback to help shape the next version of the plan, which will be more refined and informed by the evidence. A key part of that evidence is the Infrastructure Delivery Plan, the IDP, which will assess the capacity of existing infrastructure, transport, education, health, utilities and more, and identify what improvements or mitigation would be required to support sustainable growth. This ensures impacts are considered fairly and consistently across all parts of the district. The 2021 Spatial Options consultation explored a range of approaches, including potential new settlements and urban extensions, and these remain under consideration. The increased housing requirement means that the council must consider both strategic scale opportunities and smaller or medium-sized sites, depending on what the evidence shows to be sustainable. Finally, Radie, as the district's largest settlement with the broadest range of services, is expected to play an appropriate, but I stress proportional role in accommodating growth subject to the findings of the IDP and transport modelling. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Heaton. And we turn to our third questioner this evening from Mr. Richard Pryor, who has become a bit of an old-timer at these questions at this meeting, but welcome, Mr. Pryor, and if you would like to set out your question, please.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Yeah. I'm Richard Pryor. I've been doing this a bit longer than you now, for about a year, coming here regularly. I'm basically, some call me an activist, some call me an irritant, but I'm a resident. I have no formal affiliation to any group, but I care about what happens in the district. And I've been kept close to the local plan as it's been developed. My question is simply, both the public awareness and participation in the Regulation 18 local plan consultation has been very low. Promotion on social media, notably on Facebook, by third-party groups has helped raise the awareness of it, but obviously only to those people on social media. Just for context, in my Facebook group, I ran a poll. I'll give you some data here very quickly. I did a poll on my Facebook group. There were 220 people took part, which is actually more than took part in the LC Whip consultation, so it's a decent number. Of that, only one person was informed of this by the leaflet that was distributed, and only 6 via the emails from the council, and 92% were informed by social media, which shows that the communication from the council was quite low. I've also heard feedback that a minority people are aware of it, as I've just demonstrated, And those that are aware find that participation in the formal process to be quite difficult because it's very complex, very technical. And I'm concerned that residents aren't really getting involved as they should in something that's so important. So my question is, from that, what does the committee believe is the reason that public awareness is so low? And what can be done to ensure that the learnings from that are taken on board when planning Regulation 19, which is our next opportunity to look at the plan, the final plan, to ensure that more of us are aware of it? And also, what can be done to make that Regulation 19 consultation more user-friendly? Because we're finding with Regulation 18 process, the members of the public who are aware, these guys here, for example, are finding participation in it just too onerous.
Thank you, Mr. Pryor. Gave you a bit of latitude there because you put an awful lot in that wasn't actually in your question, in your submitted question. But there we are. We've got used to that. Look, I'll say at the outset, it's a complicated subject. It's a very detailed subject, and there are thousands and thousands and thousands of pages of consultation of specialist people that have been involved in preparing some quite complex documents, as is evident from the 5 public engagement sessions, along with the many, many other public sessions there have been. One point that I will make, because I was speaking to ladies and gentlemen in the gallery this evening, a leaflet has gone to every household in the district. And we do have certain means of testing that, and I'm not suggesting that there may not be the odd few houses, but as far as we're aware, the distribution process was good and reliable, and every household should have had a leaflet come through their door, at least telling them the 5 public meetings. But there we are. But as before, I'll go back to the formal answer that I've prepared. The Council recognises how important it is for residents to feel able to participate fully in shaping the local plan, and we're committed to ensuring that the consultation is open, accessible and thorough. A wide range of engagement methods have been used to promote the Regulation 18 consultation, including online updates, social media content, printed materials, direct communications, parish and community networks, and in-person events held across the district. This multi-channel approach is designed to ensure residents can access the information in ways that work best for them and reflects the Council's commitment to being thorough and inclusive in its engagement. And I will just break off there and say that when this local plan is eventually submitted to the inspector, one of the things that the inspector will look at is whether or not the consultation processes that we used were effective, and we believe that we have gone way beyond the government's recommendations on the channels that we should use. I'm looking for a nod from officers. Yep, you agree with me. Good. Okay, that's pleasing to get the appropriate nod. Residents can respond using a number of methods, including the online consultation portal, email, or by writing to us directly. We continue to highlight these options to ensure everyone can take part in a way they feel comfortable with. It is also important to note that it is entirely normal for local plan consultations to receive the majority of responses towards the end of the consultation period. Many residents take time to read and consider the material before submitting their comments. This pattern is already reflected locally. By way of illustration, and just remember that we've still got another week of the 6 weeks to go. The consultation closes on the 24th of March, but by Friday the 13th of March, the figure had increased to, I beg your pardon, on Tuesday the 3rd of March, we had received around 350 responses. By Friday the 13th of March, so that's last Friday, that figure had increased to over 1,000. And responses continue to accelerate as we approach the closing date. Because the consultation is still ongoing, it is too early to draw firm conclusions about overall levels of participation. Once the consultation closes, the Council will prepare a comprehensive consultation feedback report summarising the issues raised and explaining how they will inform the next stage of the local plan process. We are grateful for the engagement already shown by residents and community groups and encourage everyone to continue participating before the consultation closes on the 24th of March. And we have throughout the 6 weeks been actually comparing ourselves with adjacent authorities and the sorts of responses that you would expect to get. We are at least as good as our neighbouring authorities and better than many. But I do accept that we just do our best to get it out there. It is a complex document. A lot of people won't respond. We know that when we go out to consultations on various things to do with leisure, all sorts of things, we ask for feedback on the budget review, that the number of people that take time to respond is very low. So even tonight we're raising awareness through a large number of people being here, and thank you very much indeed for your question.
I do actually have a follow-up question now from you.
You told me you didn't have.
I know, but I just came to.
I gave you good latitude at the start, but you go for it, Mr. Pryor.
I've been racking my brains for 3 days to think of a follow-up. Most projects run on KPIs, key performance indicators. I'm assuming that you must have a KPI for response rate from the community to be, okay, you've hit a certain number and that is success, or you haven't and that's failure. So my question would be, what is that number? And if you don't have a KPI for that, why do you not have a KPI for that?
I think it's very difficult to have a KPI for a local plan that you only actually do 10 to 15 years apart. So, you know, there isn't a KPI as far as I'm aware, because all consultation processes are different on different subjects. But again, I will look to my colleagues on the right of me to see whether they can help me out with any specifics or whether they need to respond to you separately.
Yeah, so thank you, Chair. So as you say, we don't have a particular amount that we aim for, but what we do have is, if you look at the population of Rochford and consider what is a statistically significant response rate, so that is what can you have a confidence level of 95% with a confidence interval of plus or minus 5%. So that figure is 383 responses. So you can see that we're already over that. Yeah. Yeah. 383. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Pryor, and thank you indeed to all the questioners. And I was very rude in not actually introducing the Director of Place formally, Miss Emma Goodings. So thank you, and Jonathan Quilter, who has been working very hard on the local plan. So welcome, Jonathan. Right, with that, we'll move on to the report set out on page 5 of the agenda. Item 5, I should have said, pages 13 to 14, and that's my report on Section 106 funding. If I can find my own page on it. There we are. Right. Okay, the report is before you, members, which sets out a very brief report on 106 funding. I have asked officers, and they've agreed to present a much more detailed account of Section 106 funding. When I was leader of this authority, I insisted that we got much more regular reports than we've had since I haven't been leader. But I have asked a couple of times, and we've had it on the agenda previously this year, and there's some reconciliation work that is going on within finance. So rather than bring perhaps a inaccurate report, I said that there would be a fairly simple statement, but I am asking for a much more detailed 106 report to be brought before this committee and possibly full council very early in the new municipal year, as this is the last meeting. But I've set out a broad overview in the report on page 13. Members, any questions? Councillor Steptoe.
Thank you, Chairman. You knew I would. Now, just picking up on the 106 stuff, just so everybody here is aware, the meeting that we're having at County is on the 26th. If anybody is interested, it will be live streamed, so they can come in and have a look, or they can attend in person. And it will be discussion with the head of the ICB, Tom Abel, in understanding how he works out the process for 106 monies from developments and the process of disseminating that money to various projects, etc. That's county-wide.
Thank you, Councillor Steptoe. Section 106 funding is the bane of our lives because it frustrates us that there is a considerable amount of money in the pot. I think of the order of a couple of £1 million where Rochford District Council is concerned, considerably more where Essex County Council is concerned, but where Rochford District Council, I think it's of the order of about 1.3, 1.4 million relating to NHS expenditure. And if you talk to any of the people in this room, including councillors, what we would like to see is that money being spent on the provision of health facilities. And it is a real frustration right across the members of, right across the political divides of this council of how difficult it is to extract that money through the NHS systems rather than through any systems that Rochford District Council puts in place. A real frustration because we know there is a need. Good work going on in Hullbridge at the present time, but you know, we really want to speed up the spending of this money. It is for the community. The whole intention of Section 106 money is provided by developers, and we would expect it to be spent in reasonable time. The other frustration, of course, it can become time expired, which is why I'm always keen that members have a report before them so that they can see that we don't actually have to hand it back to the developers. There can be nothing worse than actually being given money that if you don't spend it, you have to actually hand back. So there we are. So my gentle rant about 106 funding. You want to come back, Councillor Steptoe?
Yeah, just to simply say that county-wise, it's around £8 million that's being held. That's then plus what's held by Southend Unitary Council and Thurrock Unitary Council. So it's a substantial sum of money.
Yeah, that's 8 million across the county, is it? Or
yeah, that's Essex County. Is they're holding around £8 million plus Southend plus Thurrock.
Right, okay, all right. Well, in some ways, it surprises me it's as low as 8 million, bearing in mind the size of the county. But there we are. Any other members wish to comment at all? No, sorry. Right. There's not even a recommendation on this, so agenda item 6 on page 15, which is a report on the local plan, Rochford local plan update, and I turn to Mr. Quilter, please, to provide us with that update, please.
Thank you, Chair. This report provides excuse me, an update on the ongoing preparation of the new local plan. I would like to begin by confirming that we have remained within the timetable agreed by the committee in September 2025. The Regulation 18 consultation is currently live and is due to close on the 24th of March in line with the programme set out in the updated local development scheme. We also remain on schedule for the Regulation 19 stage later this year, and we're on track to submit the plan to the Secretary of State by the end of the year. The report also highlights the ongoing development of the evidence base required to support the plan. The various evidence documents are being progressed as set out in Table 1 of the report, ensuring that the technical work underpinning the strategy, covering matters such as housing need, employment land, infrastructure and environmental considerations, continues to advance in step with the plan-making timetable. Overall, the report confirms that both the programme and supporting work streams remain on track to meet the milestones agreed for this year. I'm happy to take any questions.
Councillor Linden.
Thank you, and thank you for your report. Couple of questions. One regarding the site assessment methodology and the other one in respect to the Greenbelt review. where within the site assessment information gathering have you got regarding the needs for local people instead of the needs for people from outside of the area? It's something which I keep on looking for and cannot find. We're building houses, but are those houses for us in our local area, in the Rochford district, or are those houses for those people coming from outside of the area? It's a question I keep on asking. Do we know who's actually moving into the houses that have recently been built? The second question, I'll put them both together. We've now finally appointed a consultant regarding the Greenbelt. It states that the consultation will be completed by the summer of this year. There's a lot of work to be done on that. Where are we gathering that information from for them to be able to actually complete that work? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Linder, for the question. So, with regards to the housing need, as we've sort of set out earlier, the starting point is the government standard method, and that's the same for every authority. So, they set the housing target for every authority. If we're going to be deviating from that, then we'd need to have appropriate evidence to demonstrate why that is the case. There is a requirement to understand from that need and what our eventual need is identified in the to-be-adopted plan, what the mix of housing is. So certainly in terms of the type of housing that would be required, that needs to be outlined. And we obviously have, particularly for affordable housing as well, we have to set a target when it comes to the amount of affordable housing that would be expected to come forward on certain size sites. And of that, what amount, for example, will be affordable rented, social rented, etc. But in terms of, obviously, as a local authority, we can't control who's going to move into the area or move out of the area. It's very much a case that it's driven by that housing need target. And again, any evidence that's going to be deviating from that, whatever that may be, we would obviously have to make sure that that is robust in trying to explain to an inspector, ultimately, why that eventual figure is appropriate. At this stage, obviously, the current Regulation 18, as we explained, is not identifying allocations, and there is, as such, no target as such currently set. But working towards the Regulation 19 document, we will have to confirm what those potential allocations are and what the actual number that we're intending to allocate for. So that's very much a decision for the next stage. In terms of the Greenbelt review, so you're correct, we have appointed a consultant. They very much do have to follow the process in terms of the way that they undertake that assessment in line with national guidance. So again, government sets the policy and the appropriate guidance alongside that. And they will be following best practice, again, to ensure that whatever evidence we've, in terms of Greenbelt, that we come forward with is, again, robust and defendable. So very much that work is driven by some of the information we'll be supplying them, which comes down to a lot of the baseline mapping information that we'll be providing them, and any other sort of requirements will be feeding into that. As with all of the evidence documents, we will be bringing those back to future planning policy committees for members' consideration. So in advance of that, we can obviously provide more detailed explanations of how that work's been pulled together.
You want to come back, Councillor Linden?
Yes, thank you, Jonathan, for those answers. The second point I will go with, I interpret that as you will be supplying a lot of the information that we've gathered over the years so that the consultant can make their decisions. I'll come back to my first point through the chair. Is a point I labour that are we building houses for people from outside of the area, or are we building houses for ourselves? Your answer, Jonathan, was probably correct and succinct, but it still doesn't answer the question, who are we actually building houses for, and do we have anywhere a way of gathering that information so that we can actually make an informed decision on how many houses we actually do need? Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think the point I'm trying to make is that in terms of any response that we would give to that is primarily driven by the capacity of the area. The starting point has to be the government's targets. Again, that is set in national policy, and it's what an appointed inspector, once we've eventually submitted the plan, will be using as their starting point. So The answer to that could be multifaceted. So we certainly will be looking at a number of factors. Obviously, one of the key things that's come up more recently in recent meetings is around the transport capacity, but that by alone is not the answer. There's clearly a number of factors that will come into that. But yeah, in terms of the actual the movement of people, then clearly, like I say, we can't control that as a council in terms of whether people would choose to move into the area or not. Clearly, as we've outlined earlier, through members, there certainly has been that challenge put to government around challenging the view about how the standard method that has been changed as of December 2024, which is now more disaggregated from those local population growth figures. And certainly there is a position of challenging that from a member perspective. But as it is at the moment, the rules are set out that we have to obviously use that starting point of the standard method figure.
Thank you. Before I move on to Councillor Cripps, who's indicated, it's not a particular science, but I have spoken to a number of senior people within developments already going on within our area. The last few, the David Wilson homes at Holbridge, Countryside off of Rawith Lane, the Bloor site, and I have been agreeably surprised that my perception that they were selling to people outside of the district, and in fact that perception is generally wrong. I've not done any very recent research, and you prompted me to think that I think it's just one of those useful things to know. But of course, as you will appreciate, Councillor Linden, and as has been alluded to by Mr. Quilter, we are in the hands of market forces for people that want to move out to our lovely district. So there we are. In terms of numbers, and I think it's worth making the point, there are a number of letters that the leader, the vice chairman, and myself, and I alluded to these in the responses to the questions that were raised. And I have asked officers to make sure all of those letters, together with the replies where we get them, are on our website, because we are on the side of residents, all of us, in terms of resisting this central government diktat that we put this vast number of houses. The difficulty we have is we have to do this through a process, and we have to make our representation. But we are strongly resisting, and there's a very good letter, and I have to say initiated by the man on my right-hand side, Councillor Eaves, who did some research specifically into census data, profile of our population, and just proved that the 15,000 houses that we're supposed to deliver over this planned period, plus penalties if we fail to deliver 689 each year. And just for members of the public, just to put some sort of scale on that, 689 is a few properties just over the site of Bloor in Ashington Road. That site is 660 houses, and that is over a 7-year period. So if you actually relate what we're talking about in terms of numbers, it's 689, a figure that I keep very firmly in my head. But we're just against this centrally worked out diktat of an algorithm-based target. It's wrong, it shouldn't happen, and we will continue to find objective reasons why we don't think that those figures are accurate. Just back to this report, you touched on it, Mr. Quilter. Certainly there's a number of reports, the Greenbelt Review that you've referred to. It is a little unfortunate that due to a number of other authorities also wanting Greenbelt reports, reviews, that couldn't be put in the Regulation 18 process. But I think that's due to happen by late spring, early summer. We're going to get the outcome of that, and it will certainly be before the Regulation 19 process. Sorry, that's a bit long-winded, but because we have a number of particularly keen and interested residents, I think it's worth just expanding on some of these points that are coming out that we talk about almost every meeting that we come to. But thank you, Councillor Linden, for the points that you want to come back.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying that situation. One of the things that I hear in social media, I hear all over the country, I travel all over the country, but one thing that concerns me at the moment is the misinformation in respect of the belief from some people that every development that is being put out there from the Call to Sites is actually going to happen when it's not. The process is what we're going through, and the due process that going through, that each one of those potential housing sites will be evaluated, and those will be dismissed as the process goes forward. So where it's actually being put out there that potentially we're looking at all of these, we're not. We're actually going through the due process of evaluating each of the call for sites, each of those developments, potential developments going forward, and by the end of the process that will be netted down to a very small percentage of what's out there at the moment. I just, if we could clarify that and put out that in plain English so that us laymen can actually understand that, it would be very beneficial, I believe. Thank you.
Yeah, interesting. But I mean, you made exactly the point that I made earlier in my response to Mr. Heaton, on that the applications that are coming out at the present time are being looked at on their own individual merits, whereas this local plan process is a process that looks at the impacts, the cumulative impacts, which we can do something about. We can make representations on. Councillor Cripps has been waiting very patiently.
Thank you, Chair. 2 points in this report jumped off the page to me, and each of them produced a concern I have. So bear with me, I'll go through 2 pieces. What caught my eye first was under the heading of risks and opportunity. That's page 20 in the report. In particular, the last sentence of the first paragraph caught my attention. So I'd like to quote that verbatim as follows. Furthermore, insufficient evidence or planning for infrastructure delivery could undermine the plan's effectiveness and credibility. What worries me about that is that on page 17, table 1, there are 10 very significant pieces of evidence base that are not going to get here until the summer of 26. In fact, that table lists all of them arriving in summer 26. Now, I can well imagine there's a little bit of wiggle room in the word summer, and some of it will be spaced across a period. But by the time the summer ends, the other schedule here on the overall view is that it doesn't leave a great deal of time to produce the Regulation 19, given that a lot of those documents will be 200, 300, 400 pages or more in extent. And if we get a situation like we had recently, where a number of them come in at the same time and come to committee, then it's a very big challenge for both the officers and the members of the committee and the members in general to actually be able to respond in any depth on them. So I've got this worry that there's going to be a problem there, and I have a suggestion to make. The infrastructure delivery plan, first stage, concentrated on identifying the problems. I would suggest that if that stage 2 version doesn't come in with solutions, then that timescale I mentioned won't be enough. I believe they should be coming in with solutions at that point, not just reiterating what the problems are. I'm particularly concerned about something directly related to that. And the link to this is the new local plan risk register, specifically risk number 4, which covers infrastructure provision. And again, I'll quote that verbatim, if I may. Failure for infrastructure to be delivered by the relevant providers to appropriately support development, e.g. Essex County Council, that worries me massively. And I have a series of reasons for being concerned about it, which I'd like to go through. First and foremost, the Chairman's report earlier has already touched on unbelievable 12 years since the existing local plan started, and we're still trying to work out how 106 works and gets applied. That's an example of a specific, and you were making it general to Rochford. And as Councillor Steptoe said, it's a bigger number across the district. In fact, very recently, an independent report by the Builders Federation has rated Essex County Council as second in the list of unperforming councils for delivering infrastructure. It runs to quite a damning examination. Our own, and certainly my own, experience of the existing local plan underlines that, I think. We've got houses in fields without facilities or services because the 106 and so on has not made it. And it's been 12 years. So given the gap between the summer information evidence base arriving and the autumn finalising the Reg 19, I have no confidence that Essex County Council are going to be able to do that. And again, I reiterate, I believe that these second stage submissions, i.e. the infrastructure delivery plan, very relevant, and the transport assessment, both need to come in with solutions, not reiterating the problems. They're there for everybody to see. I won't snowball you with all the statistics which you know I know off by heart, but Essex Highways have been involved in the transport assessment from day one. They are well aware of the dozen existing junctions that require solutions, and that's 40% of the 29 junctions used in the traffic assessment. The forward view in a do-nothing scenario with the same 29 goes to 80% need work. And they vary from overcapacity, at capacity, or approaching capacity. We all know that because we live in the district. So I believe that we need to look at the mitigation that was put against risk number 4. The mitigation implied that for risk 4 to look at other third parties for alternate infrastructure provision. And it suggested, e.g. the government. I personally think that seems unlikely to me. I can't see any shape or size or indication that this government's got any idea of what the infrastructure needs to be. They're only focused on their 1.5 million houses, not how do we get all the rest of it built. So I will round up now because you're reaching for your gun over there. And reiterate my point. I see a very compressed, difficult schedule, which could fail, and that's what the risk is saying. And the fact that the risk register gives the responsibility to that to Essex County Council, I don't believe there's any evidence that suggests they will be able to cope with that. To be fair to them, they're also serving 12 other councils, most of them doing local plans, and they'll be pulled to pieces anyway. So that's my view. Cheers.
Councillor Cripps, points well made. Thank you for that. I agree with you. There is far too much focus on the delivery of 1.5 million homes, and I personally am very concerned that the Secretary of State may intervene at any time and take over the planning process in this district, as he has done in 3 other areas. I believe there's 3 other districts, boroughs, where there has been an intervention at the Regulation 19 stage, which is where we get to. In terms of the timetable, I never doubted the pressure on me as chairman of this committee, along with you, to ensure that we had a demanding schedule this year. And I'm extremely grateful to officers involved with the local plan process, because they really have worked very diligently. In terms of transport assessment, you're well aware that we spent a couple of hours talking specifically about transport assessment, and we came back to a full council meeting to talk about it again. And I don't underestimate, but I hope your pessimism is wrong, and I'm sure you hope your pessimism is wrong. The alternative being absolutely no doubt that if I do not achieve, and I could talk about the fact that I believe, with the benefit of hindsight, it's a shame that there hadn't been better scheduling in the last 10 years, because this process has been going on for 10 years. And I picked up the mantle at the beginning of this municipal year, and I asked officers to set out exactly what has been done, what needed to perhaps be redone, and the call for sites was one example where I said, let's make sure that under the changed MPPF rules and grey belt, which is the government muddying the waters in terms of green and grey belt again, I asked for some of those processes to be looked at again, and I asked for us to set out, as we've done in this report, where we are, what we've achieved and what we've got to do. But the simple fact is, as you're well aware, that if we do not submit our local plan by the 31st of December this year, it falls, and the government effectively take over under a totally new process, which could be considerably different. So as far as I'm concerned, failure is not an option. But I do realise, and I agree with a number of the points, that we need to ensure that there's sufficient officer resource to look at these reports and make sure that we do a decent job. So I'm agreeing with you, and thank you very much indeed for your comments. I don't know whether... Well, let's hear from you again, and then...
I'll just finish off. I'll be quick.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you. Yeah, I back to the first point, which was the furthermore, insufficient evidence and planning for infrastructure delivery could undermine the plan's effectiveness and credibility. And it's that word credibility that worries me. If this gets swept up quickly because of a lack of time, the first test it's going to see is the examination by the inspectorate. So if it isn't done to a degree of definition, that could test its fate. And I take your point about the timescale and what the government are putting us under, which is, as you know, I feel is ridiculous. And I do have sympathy with the job that the planners are trying to do under intense pressure. But even more worrying is if we don't make that examination good enough, that would be even worse. Thank you.
I agree with you. And officers here from Director of Place and Mr. Quilter and the Chief Executive, who's not here tonight, are well aware of my thoughts and actually this committee's views of the need to put in appropriate levels of resource to make sure that we do a good job. I don't think the Secretary of State calling it in is necessarily because we haven't done a good job. It may be because they are absolutely determined to deliver their quota of housing across the district, and that factor concerns me, as it will all members in the district. But thanks very much for making the point. Councillor Hoy, you've been waiting very patiently.
Sorry. Thank you, Chairman. I'll be brief. This is probably a subject I brought up before, and I think it's really important, which I'm going to bring up as another question again. And I think Councillor Cripps has touched on it, the number of items outstanding in Table 110 items. So given that several critical evidence studies, such as the Greenbelt Review, Transport Assessment, Infrastructure Delivery Plan and Flood Risk Assessment, I mean, some of these are stage 1 is done, stage 2 is yet to be done, but they will not be completed until summer 2026. Can officers confirm whether the current Regulation 18 proposals may need to change significantly once that evidence is available?
Thank you, Councillor Hoy. Mr. Quilter.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Hoy. So, as mentioned earlier in response to Councillor Linden, clearly there's a lot more work to be done, as outlined in Table 1 there. So there's the Regulation 18 document, as we've said, is not confirming any of those sites currently as allocations or preferred sites. And that's primarily on the basis that there is still further work to be undertaken. And that's not uncommon for any local plan. Very much so with any local planners, case owners to do this work iteratively as we progress. And a number of those documents are interconnected in terms of how we prepare them. So clearly there's still decisions that will need to be made. And as confirmed earlier, the final decisions obviously on the Regulation 19 document and what it contains, and the sites that ultimately are proposed as allocations will come back to members for final decision and have to be backed up by the appropriate evidence. So I mean, at this point in time, obviously as what's set out, we've got sites identified for further testing. In terms of predicting what would happen next, that's going to be dependent on the evidence ultimately and what that informs us. So we will be guiding members through that in terms of what our rationale and reasoning is for any decision that we make in future.
Councillor Hoy, you want to come back?
Sorry, just very briefly. So, as far as I understand your answer, it doesn't matter if there are significant changes to what's being consulted on at the moment, because it will be consulted in Regulation 19 anyway. Is that what you're saying?
Thank you. Yeah, so obviously in terms of the next stage, the Regulation 19 stage is subject also to a public consultation period. So again, a minimum period of 6 weeks. That will be allowing opportunity for people to comment on that. And clearly, again, those comments, if we're submitting by the end of the year, all comments that have been submitted will be provided to the inspector, and that will inform the examination process going forward. So again, that is an opportunity there for people to engage with the process.
Thank you, Councillor Hoy. Moving on to Councillor Steptoe, you indicated.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I wouldn't disagree with what the other speakers have been saying. The one thing that I would perhaps add to certainly what Councillor Cripps has been saying, excuse me, is around what's going to happen with LGR and the new mayor coming in. It worries me greatly that because this is all getting tangled up within that process, how much that is going to delay things, certainly from Essex's point of view, because a lot of that's got to be eventually disseminated out to the new authorities, which we don't know yet, and of course the Mayor's Strategic Office, where it all will start to sit. So I do have a big concern around that particular process and how things are going to get tangled up within that process. The other thing I wanted to say was I just wanted to pick up on something that Councillor Linden mentioned there about who is purchasing the properties built here. I just make an observation. Mr. Quilter was correct in saying that the government assessed the number of houses each council had to provide. The curious thing, and the thing that worries me, is when you look at the overall figures for London, they reduced. It's a bit of a quandary, isn't it? I'll leave it at that. Thanks, Chairman.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Steptoe. The point you make about LGR is a very good one, but we don't know the answer unless there's others in the room that can help me. There will be an impact from LGR, but we are pushing on, and I believe that's the responsible way to deal with it, as if LGR didn't exist, because we don't know the answer to your very well made point. Because we can't just turn around, we're not allowed to just turn around and say, well, because LGR might be around the corner, and I think an announcement is due possibly maybe this week, and that'll be a central government announcement. But even then, we exist as an authority and are required to produce a local plan. So I'm sorry I can't give you any answers on that. But again, LGR will have an impact. We know that. Let's see whether officers have got any better response to you than I've been able to give.
Thank you, Chair. Possibly not, but I mean, in terms of the position of where we're going, as Councillor Wootton has set out, the intention is obviously to still proceed with the plan. The government expects plans to still be produced. Obviously, based on their timetable, if we're submitting by the end of this year, the plan will then be an examination phase and in theory can still go through to adoption, even if that adoption process is undertaken by the new unitary authority. So they could still, whatever that authority ends up being, if that goes ahead, they would have the ability still, as I understand it, to adopt a plan that would have covered the area of Rochford, even if Rochford District Council no longer exists. So that's how we're proceeding. I mean, in terms of what you touched upon, in terms of obviously there's a requirement currently for strategic development strategies, so the County Council's currently got that responsibility to start thinking about that. We'll be engaged in those conversations, but really that's in parallel. For us, our priority is our local plan.
Very quickly, Councillor Steptoe, because we need to move on.
Just to pick up on a couple of points Ms. Quilter's there made. Just clarify for me, what you're saying is if new unitary council comes into place, and let's be honest, this time next year, under the current timetable, that will be going out for election in May 27. Will a unitary council, whatever configuration it is, will have a number of districts coming into it, and each one of those will have a different local plan, and so the new unitary could end up with 5, 6, 7 different local plans.
Yeah, so there's clearly going to be a transition. I mean, the eventual process you would expect is any unitary would have to make a new local plan to cover that new area, but in the interim period, whatever status we get to, even if it's the current local plan that doesn't, if we don't succeed with proceeding with a new local plan for Rochford, that would still remain the extant plan until it's replaced by that new unitary authority's local plan. So in essence, yes, you could find some unitaries will have multiple local plans from what's called the legacy authorities. So in the case of us, if Rochford no longer exists, so they remain the plan until they're replaced by a new one, regardless of where it comes from. So.
And just to muddy the waters a bit more, Councillor Steptoe, you didn't take it the year after when the appointment of a mayor is due to happen in 2028. So, and, you know, in the meantime, we push ahead. Look, we've had a good, Councillor Cripps, I'm going to move on because at the end of the day, this was an update report and I've allowed a really good debate, partly because I've taken part in the debate at length as well. So I'd like to just move on because at the end of the day, it's a simple recommendation to note. So R1, that the Planning Policy Committee notes the Rochford Local Plan update as set out in the report. Can we take that as noted, please, members? Noted. Thank you very much. Right, we move on to item 7, which is the Rochford District Council response to the National Planning Policy Framework, December 2025 consultation. And that report begins on page 24. And I turn to Mr. Quilter to introduce the report, please, where they move on to members' questions. Mr. Quilter.
Thank you, Chair. This report presents Rochford District Council's response to the government's consultation on the revised National Planning Policy Framework, published on the 16th of December 2025 and closed on the 10th of March 2026. This is a substantial national consultation forming part of the implementation of the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act 2023 and the Planning and Infrastructure Act 2025. An officer-level response was submitted, and following your consideration this evening, a member-endorsed version will be submitted. The consultation is extensive, containing 225 questions that span the full breadth of national planning policy. These include proposed changes to plan making and decision making, updates to housing policy, including grey belt, as well as reforms relating to climate and energy standards, viability, transport, and wider infrastructure. The draft NPPF represents one of the most substantial restructurings of national policy since 2012, when it was first brought in. It clearly distinguishes between plan-making and decision-making policies, meaning that local policies conflicting with national decision-making policy will carry very limited weight. As members will be aware, the Council is currently preparing its new local plan under the existing plan-making system, with a statutory requirement to submit the plan by the 31st of December 2026. As such, the revised NPPF will not apply to the local plan presently being prepared, but it will directly influence future plan reviews and the national planning context once finalised. Because the consultation deadline fell prior to today's meeting, an officer-level response was submitted to ensure the Council's views were captured within the required timeframe. The version included in Appendix A reflects the full response we are now seeking member endorsement for this evening, enabling its submission as the Council's formal position. The report identifies several issues of particular relevance to Rochford District arising from the proposed reforms, including the deliverability of future plan-making timetables, given the scope of evidence required, the balance between national and local policy and areas where local flexibility may be reduced, the implications of the proposed grey belt policy for a district with extensive greenbelt land such as ours, restrictions on local discretion relating to climate and energy standards, the proposed approach to viability, including standardised methods and potential consequences for infrastructure and affordable housing, the need for national policy to reflect the district's well-recognised transport and infrastructure constraints. Chair, the recommendation before members is to approve the Council's response for formal submission to Government. Happy to take any questions.
Members, as we move into debate, could I just ask you, please, to keep your points very specific to points as set out in the report and make reference to those points on any things that you wish to raise so that we know exactly where we are in the debate. Councillor Hoy, you wanted to come in.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll be brief. I just really wanted to say that I welcome the detailed response to be submitted to the Government. It raises a number of valid concerns which we've all spoken about, particularly around infrastructure capacity, environmental standards. It also mentions about the practical challenges of delivering local plans within the timetable. I just note that we've also said about the timetable for the response for this. It's sort of reflected in the timetable we have for our own local plan, but that's not for discussion here. Can I just confirm if the officer said that any changes to the MPPF will not affect the local plan that we are delivering at the moment, or did I mishear?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Hoy. So at the moment, obviously, this is a consultation. There's a draft version of the MPPF. The Government, I think, has indicated broadly that this would be published possibly in the summer, maybe sort of early summer, but we'll have to see. Clearly, that will be dependent on how many responses they receive and the nature of what's been said. But yeah, in terms of obviously the plan that we're currently preparing and the timetable that we've got is on the basis that it would be in conformity with the current MPPF, i.e. the December 2024 version of the MPPF. So that's very much what we're preparing the plan in accordance with. Now, clearly that's different for decision making. So in terms of planning applications, if this new MPPF comes in, that would have an immediate effect on decisions that are being made from that point onwards. But for the purposes of our local plan, it's being prepared under the 2024 versions. That's why we've got this deadline by the end of this year.
So I think that's quite clear that it won't affect our local plan as such, but if for any applications that's come forward based on our local plan, it could affect those applications. Yeah? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hoy. Any other members wish to comment at all? Councillor Cripps.
Thank you, Chair. You'll be pleased to know that it's very, very brief.
Delighted.
I did start to go through this, but made a conscious decision not to comment on it. It's clear to me this is a dumbing down of the planning function. Just like the previous update of the MPPF, it's been manipulated to go down a set route. So the thing's on rails, and I want no part of that, so I'm not going to comment on it.
Thank you, Councillor Cripps. Right, no other members are indicating. So if that's the case, I will now move to a motion, members, that the recommendation on page 24 be approved. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Eaves, thank you very much indeed. And I will read out that recommendation, which is R1, only one recommendation, that members approve the Council's response to the Government's National Planning Policy Framework December 2025 consultation as set out in Appendix A for submission as the Council's member-endorsed responses. Those in favour? Those against? And those abstaining? One abstaining. 6-4 and one abstention. Thank you very much indeed, and thank you to officers for putting those responses together. Right, we turn to agenda item 8 on page 95, and I ask for who's going to introduce that? Mr. Quilter again.
I think it's me if that's okay. But all I was
All right, sorry.
All I was going to say is that you have the report in front of you, the usual performance report. This is for Q3. Happy to take any questions.
Any questions, members? Councillor Hoy.
Thank you, Chairman. Just quickly, I'm trying to, my pen stopped working because it ran out of charge. Paper doesn't run out of charge, does it? But all these new ones do. So I'm using my fingers on this. It's really around the, surprise, surprise, local plan again. The Q3 performance report shows that local plan project as green with no overall issues. And I'm aware that Mr. Quilter said that he feels it's on target in one of the earlier reports. But it's also shown as a risk, overall risk as amber. I mean, it really is, are we really comfortable with the overall risk at amber, whereas I think it should be red? We said how critical it is, and I think it should, I'd be more comfortable if it was red. In addition, the overall status is relying on 10 reports which we're reporting in spring, summer 2026, one of which is not yet even commissioned. I'm sure it will be, because I have faith in our officers to do that, but we are relying on outside consultants to produce 10 reports by the end of the summer 2026, was then the Regulation 19 consultation. So although we've got an overall status of green and an overall issues of green, I still think they should probably be considered to be amber. In addition to that, can I have assurances how this is being monitored and how any changes to these overall statuses will be reported back to members of this committee over the summer without waiting for a committee meeting, because I think this could change very quickly. There will be no meetings almost certainly in July and August. That's normally the case. So I'm concerned how that will be reported.
Turn to the Director of Place.
Thank you. Yeah, so I think we've considered that the overall risk is amber, noting that there are reports that, as we've talked about, that are still to be completed, but given the stage of commissioning and the work that's underway, we consider that to be an amber risk rather than a red risk, but happy to look at that again. In terms of overall project updates, and it sort of feeds into the next item and things we've been discussing already, obviously there is going to be an awful lot of work to do post-election in order to get a Regulation 19 document out. So there will be numerous planning policy committees from sort of May, June onwards. But if there are any issues in between times that we need to bring to the attention of members, we will of course do that through emails or briefings as necessary. But yeah, very happy to do that. I know we did the prior to the Reg 18 consultation, we held a series of sort of thematic member briefings, so we can certainly do that again on some of the main documents as well, but also on timetable if members felt that would be helpful.
Councillor Eaves.
Thank you. I think one of the things that I would support it being amber for, not trying to be contrary, but I think what we're actually experiencing in this council is we are doing as much as we possibly can, and I think that we've actually done quite well. But we are, as has been pointed out earlier on, we are reliant on other people and other organisations, so that's what pulls it back.
I'm not sure that a red would be fair on that, because that would reflect on us. And I think from that point of view, I think that we have been going at pace this year to keep it on schedule. And as Jonathan Coulter said earlier on, we are still on schedule. Yes, there are potential issues, but I think because of that, I think the middle ground is, to me, sounds fair.
And I think the assurance that we've been given by the Director of Police that these will be kept under review as we go into the next few months is reassuring, because we need to make sure that we do keep on track with these, and we're very aware of the position that external forces could influence the rating through no fault of our own. Councillor Hoy, if you want to wrap up on the points you've been making.
Yeah, just very, very quickly, my concern is really around the fact that if you look at the work plan, this committee doesn't appear to be meeting until September 2026. Is that correct, or is there a meeting earlier than that in June, perhaps?
Yeah, so the meetings are TBC. So whilst the performance reports are in terms of the end of the quarters, actually you'll see there's a whole host of reports which follow on the work plan, which are TBC. So I don't want to prejudge any comment on the next item, but we will be probably looking at meetings, monthly meetings, May, June, July, possibly August as well, so we can get to full council in September to meet the Regulation 19 consultation timescale. So there will be a significant ask of members of this Planning Policy Committee in the next municipal year.
Right, if there's no other comments, we just turn to the recommendation on page 95, and that is, I'll read it out, recommendation 1, that members receive and note the Q3 2025-26 performance report, which provides an update on progress to date against the corporate plan priority, deliverables, corporate projects and formal complaints for the economy and prosperity theme. Is that noted, members? Thank you very much indeed. And moving finally on to agenda item 9, which is the committee work plan. And that may be the Director of Place again.
Yeah, so I've, in response to Councillor Hoy's question, that was going to be my main thing that I want to bring to members' attention, but also on that list yet, my apologies, I haven't put on the Section 106 update reports that Councillor Wootton referred to earlier on, so there will be an early one of those at one of those earlier committees, and then every 6 months thereafter, which will include both RDC and ECC information on Section 106 collection and spend.
Councillor Steptoe.
You'll be pleased to know, Chairman, it's not about S106, it's about SIL. So close, but not quite there. We did agree some time back at these meetings that work would be done on SIL running alongside, because it's a very important thing that once the new plan comes into place, that we do have SIL in there. I don't see it on the forward plan, and it's been some considerable time since we've had an update on where we are within that process. So I'd like to see some action moving forward on that, because that's going to be a significant item going forward with the new developments.
Thank you, Councillor Steptoe. And indeed, in the briefing for this meeting, Director of Place did say this was by no means a comprehensive work programme, but thank you very much indeed for reminding us, because that is a very important piece of work. The debate between SIL and 106 is an interesting debate. Have both, yeah. But that's been noted, no doubt that that needs to be added. So the recommendation there is that the Council Committee notes and endorses its work programme for the municipal year and considers any further items that need to be added. Duly noted, members? Thank you very much. Now, before we conclude the meeting, this is the last planning policy meeting of the municipal year. Certainly, I want to place on record my appreciation, first of all, to members throughout the year. We've had some robust discussions, debates, and we've all, I believe, worked hard to contribute constructively, particularly to the formation of the local plan. So I made a commitment that all of our meetings would be held publicly. There would be no working groups. Nothing would happen behind closed doors. And then there would be any suggestion that we were just coming to these meetings to rubber stamp perhaps what had happened in working groups. And that is absolutely no criticism of what might have gone before in previous 10 years, that this has all been working. I just made that commitment. And I'm pleased to say that's exactly what has happened. Obviously, there's been 1 or 2 officer briefings for the Vice Chair and myself, and there's been training sessions, I can think, on transport assessment. But when I made that promise at the start of the year, I didn't absolutely know I would be able to commit to it, because there is some very complex material in the planning process. So we've achieved that collectively. I particularly want to pay tribute to people that have asked questions through the year. I will mention Mr. Pryor, because I know that he's been a regular attender and he's asked some really good questions, but also there have been a number of other very good questions. I particularly want to thank our audience tonight, a very good public attendance, and it can be seen as a bit of a dry subject, as important as it is, because it's about our district in the years to come. And we all in this chamber care about what our district looks like. So I would like to thank you very much indeed for your patience in listening tonight. I do hope you didn't come under false pretenses thinking that we were going to be talking about anything different, but I also want to thank you for your patience in the last hour and a half of listening to the debate that we've had. And hopefully you get some reassurance that we are very alert to the issues that concern all of us: infrastructure, inappropriate development, numbers of houses, and caring about our district and wanting to protect our district now and in the future. That doesn't mean to say that we're not going to have development in our area. That is a fact of life. And we're not against all development. What we are against is inappropriate development, and we're certainly against meeting numbers which have been set as a target by an algorithm. So I want to thank questioners that have come. Thank you very much, gentlemen, tonight. I also want to pay tribute to officers who I have driven intensively to ensure that we do meet the timetable set out. It's a demanding timetable and very constructive debate tonight, recognising the continuing challenges that we have. And thank my Vice Chairman, Councillor Eaves, and thank Jackie as our support officer from Democratic Services for sitting there very patiently listening to me waffle and recording it meticulously in the minutes. And thank you very much. And with that, on a very positive note, thank you very much for attending tonight, and I will conclude the meeting. Thank you very much at 9 o'clock.